Hey guys, and welcome back to the next episode of the QC show. And this is part 2 of my chat with Shashwati Talakdar. Enjoy. I wanted to change tact a little bit because now we've talked about film, but a part of you that I was also surprised to learn is that you're also a playwright and you're directing plays for the stage. Is that something that the skill set is the same, or do you feel that you have to be adaptable in that environment as well?
Yes, the playwriting is again just something that just sort of happened. I'd started out in theater. That was really sort of my first love before I went to film, and I did a lot of theater in school and college. And it just sort of, it's just one of these things that sort of came along, and I tried my hand at it, and I suddenly remembered how much I used to love theater. And it's very, very different because simply because of, I think the symbolic space you're dealing with in theater. It's such a different way to think about sort of emotion and storytelling, and also how far you can go with the possibilities in theater. Because when I found that what I was most attracted to was sort of an absurdist sort of a sensibility, satirical / absurdist sensibility. I could just write things that are completely improbable, dialogue that's pretty much improbable in real life, because you're already in kind of a space that's sort of stylized, and if you just run with it, you kind of have all this freedom to do things a certain way. So then I started writing this play, and then I found that I had so much to sort of say that it's basically what I'm doing is it's like one large play, and then I'm doing one act at a time.
Right, you've got the through, and you've got a play coming out this year being put on by what John Brownlee has his Taipei Shorts series, and you've presented something for each part, and part 3 will be in September, is that right?
Yes, it's going to be from the 11th of September to the 13th, so it's that weekend. People in Taipei or anybody come into Taipei at that time, please check it out.
And now it's mainly in English, but there was a Chinese component.
Yes, so it just seemed sort of natural to include something about the space where I'm in. I mean, I really wasn't going to pretend I was in a living room in New York City, because that just seemed silly. I sort of set the play in some sort of a spot somewhere in between India and China, or anywhere in between, because I suppose that reflects exactly where I am mentally anyway.
And it's in a fortress, right?
It's in a sort of the first 2 parts are sort of in a detention center that's made to sort of look like a monastery. So it's a monastery / detention center, possibly somewhere in China, but we are not sure. So it's very squarely in my brain, I suppose,
Well, because you mentioned it's part of your sensibility, so I'm thinking fortress, you're thinking detention center. So we both have different opinions of you.
Yeah, you're medieval. I'm with the times. I only think of re-education camps and detention centers.
Right. With playwriting and directing, have you found a similarity that you can compare with film and video, or do you really feel that those are two different beasts?
There's some overlaps, and then there's some differences. The overlaps are, of course, that you're always sort of looking for sort of a through line, and kind of some sort of an emotional truth, no matter what the situation is, and how your characters relate to each other, and how they feel about each other, and how they sort of change or don't change, and the sort of journey that they take, which is sort of these abstract elements that are common to both theater and film. But that's where I think the similarities stop, because after that, the way your space is dealt with in theater and in film is very, very different. and the elements you get to play with in cinema as opposed to the theater are again sort of like very different. And also I think how actors relate to the material, and how they have to sort of change and shift. So the way you sort of work with actors changes drastically between film and theater.
How do you think an actor might change in a play compared to film?
So the major thing that happens to how acting unfolds in a play versus in cinema is the role of memory, and the sort of sense memory and the emotional memory an actor is required to have, and the kind of concentration they must have is very different from what they would do in a play than what they would do in a film. And like in a film, they often have to just think a thought. They don't actually have to project it in a particular way, and then they have to remember things because things are like often like out of sequence. And so this kind of like sort of the mental effort you actually have to spend to hold on to the to those emotions and those reactions and those thoughts and those feelings as a character, like often you're doing it over days, months, weeks at a time, so the concentration is just enormous. And but while in a play there's like all of these things, like you're sort of it's sort of the difference between running a marathon and like working up to a sprint. And so and in a play, like you work and you work and you train and you train and you work, and then lo and behold it's for that space of an hour or 15 minutes that you completely just sort of get to forget yourself and be this other person on stage and just kind of go through this like alchemical process that's of shorter duration, but it's like much more sort of intense.
And the audience is there, and then that enhances the experience.
Exactly. And and all of these things are sort of going, and that's why like one performance is never the same as another.
Well, with that in mind, I'm looking forward to your new play coming out, and I really encourage anybody who's listening to check it out.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
Hey guys, well that's it for another episode of the QC Show. And as always, thanks for listening. Please feel free to leave any comments and tell us what you think about the show. Specifically, if you're a filmmaker or even a playwright who is international, working in 2 or 3 or even more countries, let us know what you think and what your experiences are like. That's it. Thanks, guys.